Ethan froze, his breath catching midair. The child's dark hair clung to her face, soaked by rain. She was wearing a simple white dress, the same kind Lily had worn that last Sunday morning before everything changed. His heartbeat thundered. "Lily," he whispered, almost against reason. The girl tilted her head slightly, her expression calm yet hauntingly familiar. Then, without a word, she turned and began walking deeper into the cemetery. He hesitated. Logic screamed that it was impossible. But grief has its own logic, the kind that blurs lines between memory and reality. Ethan stood, his shoes sinking in mud, and followed her. Every few steps, he caught glimpses of her through the mist. She didn't look back, only walked, slowly, gracefully, like someone leading him somewhere. The path curved toward an older part of the graveyard, where moss crept over forgotten stones and the air felt heavier. "Wait," he called, his voice echoing against the marble angels. The girl stopped. For a heartbeat, she stood still, then turned halfway toward him. Her eyes, those same blue eyes, looked into his. They were Lily's eyes. Ethan felt his knees weaken. He stumbled closer, but by the time he reached the old willow tree, she was gone. Only the echo of rain and his own ragged breathing remained. He pressed his palms to his face, trembling. "I'm losing my mind," he murmured. But a small voice inside whispered, "What if you're not?" When Ethan finally turned back, he noticed something lying at the base of Lily's grave, a folded piece of paper, damp from the rain. Carefully, he opened it. The handwriting was childish but clear. "Tell Mom I'm okay." His chest tightened. The note looked old, the ink slightly faded, yet he'd never seen it before. His hands shook. Was this some cruel trick? A coincidence? Or something else, something he couldn't explain? He rushed home, his mind spiraling. His house felt emptier than usual. The smell of old coffee lingered, and the sound of the rain against the window seemed louder in the silence. On the mantelpiece sat Lily's last photo, her missing front tooth, her favorite pink hairband. He stared at it for a long time before finally sinking onto the couch. 4 years, Ethan had been a man divided, one part businessman, one part broken father. After Lily's death, he'd built walls made of work and wealth, but nothing had filled the hollow left behind. People had told him grief fades. They lied. It only waits. Hours later, the sound of soft knocking startled him. When he opened the door, a young woman stood there, soaked from the storm, her umbrella trembling in her grip. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, "my car broke down near the gate. Could I borrow a phone?" Ethan nodded, distracted. Something about her voice, the tilt of her smile, it tugged at him. He invited her in, offered a towel. As she stepped inside, she noticed the photograph on the mantel. "She's beautiful," the woman said softly. "Your daughter?" "Yes," Ethan whispered. "She was." The woman looked at him for a moment longer, her eyes deep with a strange kind of understanding. "I lost someone too," she said. "Sometimes, I feel like they try to send us signs." Her words struck him like lightning. Signs. The note. The girl. The timing. Ethan forced a smile, but his thoughts swirled. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Maybe they do." As she left, Ethan glanced once more at the folded note on the table. He couldn't explain how it had appeared, or why the handwriting looked exactly like Lily's. But one thing was certain, that day at the grave wasn't over. It had only just begun. Ethan barely slept that night. The sound of the storm had faded, but the memory of the girl and the note looped endlessly in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, standing by the oak tree, her hair damp, her eyes quietly pleading. He woke up before dawn, his chest heavy and thoughts tangled. By morning, the air smelled of wet pavement and distant sunlight. Ethan brewed a pot of coffee and stared at the paper once more. The words hadn't blurred or bled, even though it had been raining hard. The ink was real. The handwriting, unmistakable. He remembered Lily's way of curling her Ellis, the small uneven loops at the end of her name. This was hers. But how? He reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts, hovering over one name he hadn't dialed in years, Grace. His ex-wife. They had fallen apart after the accident. Grief had made them strangers who shared the same wound but not the same way of healing. Grace had moved to another city to start over, and Ethan had buried himself in business deals and empty days. He stared at the name for a long moment before locking the phone again. He couldn't call her, not yet. Not until he knew what this meant. Later that afternoon, he drove back to the cemetery. The world looked different in sunlight, less haunted, but still quiet in a way that made the heart ache. He walked to Lily's grave, half expecting another note, another glimpse of that mysterious girl. But everything was still. The ground was dry, the flowers undisturbed. "Dad!" The voice came from behind him, small, hesitant. Ethan spun around. It was her again. The same girl. Her hair shimmered under the soft light, and her eyes, those same ocean blue eyes, met his. "You came back," she said. Ethan's lips parted, his voice shaking. "Who are you?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You looked sad yesterday." Tears pricked his eyes. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said gently, trying to steady his tone. "Where are your parents?" She looked past him toward the grave. "They're gone." The simplicity of her words cut through him. His heart clenched, and before he could say more, she turned and started walking again, toward the willow tree, just like before. Ethan followed, but slower this time, his mind trying to piece together logic where none seemed to fit. As they reached the far side of the cemetery, she stopped near a row of older tombstones. "This is where I come when I miss them," she whispered. "I talk to them here. You can talk to her too. She hears you, you know." Her words trembled with innocence and truth. Ethan swallowed hard. "Do you know Lily?" The girl's gaze softened. "She talks about you." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The air around him seemed to still. "What do you mean she talks about me?" "She says you miss her every day," the girl murmured, looking at the ground. "But she wants you to smile again. She doesn't like when you cry." Ethan took a step back, his pulse racing. "Who told you to say that?" The girl lifted her eyes, calm and clear. "No one told me. I just hear her." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft rustle of the willow leaves. Ethan's rational mind screamed for explanations, imagination, coincidence, grief hallucination, but his heart whispered something else entirely. He knelt slowly, his voice cracking. "What's your name?" "Emma," she said, after a pause. "Emma Ray." Ethan nodded numbly, trying to process the impossible. "Emma, would you like something to eat? I can take you home. Maybe we can talk more there." She smiled, small and knowing. "Okay." As they walked toward his car, Ethan couldn't help but glance back one last time at Lily's grave. The petals were still there, but something new caught his eye. A single white feather rested atop the stone, glowing faintly under the afternoon sun. His breath hitched. A sign. On the drive home, Emma hummed softly beside him, the same lullaby he used to sing to Lily every night before bed. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't ask how she knew it. He couldn't. When they reached his house, she gazed around, curious. "It's quiet here," she said. "Like it's waiting for something." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe it is." He made her a sandwich, but she ate only half. Instead, she wandered into the living room, staring at Lily's photo. "She was really happy," Emma said. "She told me she loved painting sunsets." Ethan froze. That was something only Lily and Grace had known. His throat tightened. "How did you?" Emma turned to him and said softly, "She told me because she misses you, Mr. Walker. She wants you to know she's not gone. Just different now." Ethan felt the world tilt around him. His eyes blurred. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Emma whispered, "you're not listening when she tries to tell you herself." Her voice was steady, too wise for her age. Ethan's chest ached as the truth began to fracture his disbelief. He sank into the couch, his hands trembling. Emma stepped closer and placed her small hand over his. "It's okay to talk to her," she said. "She can hear you." And in that quiet moment, Ethan's walls, years of grief, anger, guilt, began to crack. A single tear slid down his cheek as he whispered, "Hi, Lily. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Right, yes, and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. For the first time in years, Ethan's home didn't feel completely empty. Emma's quiet presence seemed to fill the hollow spaces between walls that had forgotten laughter. She wandered around the living room like someone searching for memories that didn't belong to her but somehow did. Ethan sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, his thoughts tangled in disbelief. Who was this girl? She looked like Lily, spoke like her, even knew things only she could have known. Yet everything about her felt real, too human to be a dream, too extraordinary to be ordinary. Do you live nearby? He finally asked, breaking the silence. Emma shook her head. Not really. I stay with a lady named Mrs. Harper for now. She helps kids who don't have anyone. Ethan frowned slightly. You mean an orphanage? She nodded, twisting her fingers together. It's not bad. Just quiet. Like your house. He wanted to ask more, but something in her expression told him not to push. Instead, he smiled faintly. Do you want to watch something? Maybe a movie? Her face brightened. Can we watch The Painted Sky? Ethan's chest constricted. That had been Lily's favorite movie, the one they watched every year on her birthday. How do you know that one? He whispered. Emma blinked. She told me. The words fell like a whisper through glass. Ethan didn't respond. He simply turned on the TV, found the old DVD, and let the movie play. The sound of soft music filled the room, wrapping them in something strangely comforting. Halfway through, Emma leaned against his shoulder. She said you used to sing along during this part, she murmured. But you stopped after she left. Ethan's throat burned. Yeah, he said hoarsely. I stopped a lot of things after she left. Emma didn't reply, just stayed there quietly, humming the tune under her breath. When the credits rolled, the room was heavy with silence again. Ethan glanced down at her. She had fallen asleep, her small hand still clutching the hem of his sleeve. Something inside him softened. He covered her with a blanket and whispered, You remind me too much of her. He sat there long after she drifted off, listening to the rain's soft return outside. In her sleep, Emma murmured a name. Lily. The next morning, sunlight cut through the curtains in thin gold lines. Ethan found Emma sitting at the dining table, sketching on an old notepad. When he walked closer, his breath caught. It was Lily's face, drawn with uncanny detail. Every stroke captured her spirit, the playful smile, the twinkle in her eyes. You draw? He asked softly. Emma nodded. She helps me sometimes. In dreams. He swallowed hard, unsure whether to feel frightened or grateful. Before he could speak again, the doorbell rang. Ethan opened the door to find Grace standing there, holding a bouquet of lilies. Her face was pale but composed. I got your message, she said quietly. My message? Ethan blinked. I didn't. She held up her phone. You texted me last night, come home. There's something you need to see. He froze. I didn't send that. Grace frowned, confusion flickering across her face. But before either could say more, Emma peeked from behind the corner. Grace's eyes widened. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Ethan, she whispered, clutching the bouquet tighter. She looks. I know, Ethan murmured. Exactly like her. Grace stepped closer, her voice trembling. Who is this? Ethan hesitated, unsure how to explain what even he didn't understand. Her name's Emma. I found her at the cemetery. Or maybe she found me. Grace knelt slightly, her eyes meeting the child's. Hi, sweetie. Emma smiled softly. Hi, Mrs. Walker. Grace froze. How did you? She told me, Emma said simply. Grace looked up at Ethan, her eyes glistening. Ethan, what is this? He shook his head helplessly. I don't know, Grace. But she knows things only Lily could have known. Grace pressed a hand over her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. This can't be real. Ethan stepped forward, voice breaking. I thought the same. But she's here. And she says Lily still talks to her. The air thickened with the kind of silence that only grief understands. Grace reached for the table to steady herself, her knees shaking. Lily, she whispered, almost to the air itself. If you're really there, please give me a sign. A gust of wind swept through the open doorway, scattering the bouquet across the floor. White petals spiraled through the air, one landing in Emma's palm. She held it up gently and whispered, "She heard you." Grace's sob broke free, soft, raw, full of years of pain she'd kept buried. Ethan reached for her hand, and for the first time since the funeral, they held each other without blame, only sorrow. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." That night, the house felt alive again. Grace stayed for dinner, the first time she had set foot inside since the day they buried Lily. The walls that had once echoed with laughter now carried a new kind of stillness, not empty, but watchful, as if waiting to see what would unfold. Emma sat between them at the table, swinging her legs, smiling at their awkward silence. "You both cook funny," she said suddenly, giggling. "Lily told me your spaghetti always sticks together." Grace froze mid-bite, her fork trembling. "She said that?" Emma nodded innocently. "And that you used to sing while cooking, so it wouldn't burn." A tear slipped down Grace's cheek, and she laughed through it. "That's true." Her voice cracked. "That's true." Ethan stared at Emma, every breath heavier than the last. Every word this child spoke seemed to slice through time, pulling Lily's voice back into the room. After dinner, Grace tucked her hair behind her ear and whispered, "Ethan, can I talk to you?" They stepped into the hallway, keeping their voices low. "Who is she really?" Grace asked, eyes wide, desperate. "You must have checked where she came from." "I'm trying to," he said quickly. "But everything about her is strange. She appeared out of nowhere. And she knows things no one else could." Grace leaned against the wall, shaking her head. "I want to believe, Ethan. God, I do. But this," she looked toward the living room, where Emma was humming softly to herself, the same lullaby Lily used to sing before bed. "This isn't possible." Ethan swallowed. "Maybe it's not supposed to be possible." Grace sighed, her voice trembling. "You think she's Lily?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know what to think. But I know she's here for a reason." Grace nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "Maybe to heal us." Later that night, after Grace had gone home, Ethan found Emma sitting by the window, gazing out at the moonlight. The silver glow brushed her face, and for a fleeting moment, she looked exactly like Lily again, soft, radiant, untouchable. "You okay?" he asked, taking a seat beside her. She nodded. "I like it here. It feels warm." He smiled faintly. "I'm glad. You can stay as long as you need." Emma's lips curved upward. "Thank you. That means a lot." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside. Then she whispered, "You know, she's proud of you." Ethan looked at her. "Who?" "Lily," Emma said simply. "She says you kept her drawings safe." He froze. "How do you?" "She told me about the box under your bed," Emma continued softly. "The one you never open because you're scared it'll hurt too much." His chest constricted. He hadn't told anyone about that box. Not Grace, not even his therapist. Slowly, he stood and walked to his bedroom. Emma followed quietly, her small steps echoing in the hallway. Ethan knelt down and pulled out the old wooden box. Dust clung to its edges. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside were Lily's sketches, her broken crayons, and the last unfinished drawing she'd been working on the morning of the accident, a family of 3 holding hands under a bright blue sky. Emma leaned over his shoulder. "She never got to finish it," she whispered. He nodded, eyes wet. "I know." "She wants you to," Emma said. "For her." Ethan stared at her, his tears spilling freely now. He reached for a pencil, his fingers trembling, and began to draw. The line connecting their hands, the one Lily had never completed, slowly took shape under his touch. When it was done, the picture glowed faintly under the lamplight, colors somehow brighter than they'd ever been. Ethan felt warmth bloom inside his chest, like the air itself was whispering thank you. Emma smiled. "She's happy now." For the first time in years, Ethan smiled back without forcing it. "So am I." The next morning, Grace returned, holding an old photo album. She sat with Emma on the couch, showing her pictures of Lily, her birthdays, her school plays, her messy art projects. Emma listened intently, as if each story were a piece of herself she was remembering. When they reached the last page, Emma touched the photo gently. "She loved you both a lot," she said. Grace blinked back tears. "We loved her too." Emma smiled. "She knows." As she said it, Ethan noticed something strange, the faint shimmer around her hand, like sunlight caught in water. It was gone in a blink, but it left him breathless. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Ethan sat by the window again, holding Lily's drawing. He realized something had changed, not just in the house, but in him. The grief that had once been a wound now felt like a scar, tender, yes, but healing. He whispered to the quiet night, "Thank you." And for the first time, he thought he heard her voice reply, soft, loving, and free, "I never left, Daddy." Ethan smiled through tears. "I know, sweetheart. I know." Days turned into a rhythm that almost felt like peace. Ethan began waking to sunlight instead of silence. The scent of pancakes filled the kitchen again, Emma's favorite breakfast, though she never ate more than a few bites. She laughed softly when Ethan burned the first batch. "Lily said you always do that," she teased, her grin bright as morning. Ethan chuckled under his breath. She wasn't wrong. Grace had started visiting more often, drawn by a pull neither of them could quite name. Each visit seemed to stitch something invisible back together, the small, broken threads between two parents who had once loved and lost everything. One afternoon, they sat together on the porch while Emma played in the yard, weaving small crowns from dandelions. Grace looked at Ethan, her expression gentler than it had been in years. "Do you think she's really gone?" she asked quietly. Ethan watched Emma chasing a butterfly. "Maybe not," he said. "Maybe she just changed form." Grace smiled faintly. "I wish I could see it the way you do." "You will," he said softly. "You already are." The air shimmered with quiet warmth. Emma ran back, holding out a tiny flower crown. "For you," she said, placing it on Grace's head. "She says you used to wear these when you gardened together." Grace froze. Her breath caught as memories flooded in, soil under her fingernails, Lily's laughter echoing in sunlight. "She remembered that," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. Emma nodded with a serene smile. "She remembers everything that made you happy." That night, after Grace left, Ethan tucked Emma into the guest room bed. "You know," he said softly, "you've brought a lot of light back into this house." Emma blinked up at him. "It was never dark, Mr. Walker. You just closed the curtains." He smiled sadly. "Maybe it's time to open them for good." She reached out and touched his hand. "Then promise me something." "Anything," he said. "When you see the sunrise tomorrow," she whispered, "don't look away. She'll be there." Ethan nodded, though his chest tightened with a strange unease. "I'll try." That night, sleep came heavy and strange. Ethan dreamed of Lily, not as the little girl he lost, but older, standing on a beach bathed in golden light. She smiled at him, her hair glimmering in the sun. "Dad," she said, "thank you for finding her." He stepped forward, tears streaking his face. "Lily, I miss you." She shook her head gently. "You don't have to. I'm here, just not the way you think." When Ethan woke, dawn was spilling over the horizon in soft gold and pink. He stumbled to the window, heart racing. The light felt alive, pulsing, wrapping around him like warmth from a familiar embrace. Down the hall, he heard movement. Emma was awake, sitting on the bed, staring out the same direction. "You see it too," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "She's here, isn't she?" Emma smiled. "Always." But then her smile wavered, just slightly. "She says it's almost time." Ethan frowned. "Time for what?" Emma didn't answer. She simply looked at him with a tenderness that hurt to see. "Don't be sad when I go." The words hit him like a sudden chill. "What do you mean go? You can't." She reached out, placing a finger against his lips. "Sure. Sometimes love borrows faces, just to say goodbye properly." He stared at her, realization creeping through his chest like slow fire. No, he whispered. No, you're real. You have to be. Emma's eyes shimmered, not with tears, but light. I was real enough to help you heal. Ethan's throat closed. Please don't go. She gave a sad little smile. You're stronger now. She can rest. The rest of the day passed in an ache he couldn't describe. Grace arrived later, unaware of what had passed, and found Ethan standing at the window, pale and distant. What's wrong? She asked. He turned slowly, his voice hollow. She said she's leaving. Grace's face fell. Emma. He nodded. She said it's time. Grace's lips trembled, but she didn't argue. Somehow, deep down, she already knew. That evening, Emma sat with them for dinner, her laughter softer than usual, her gaze far away. Afterward, she hugged Grace tightly, whispering something in her ear that made the woman crumble into tears. When she turned to Ethan, she took his hand and pressed a small folded paper into it. For when you miss her again, she said. But promise me you'll read it only when the sky turns the same color as her favorite sunset. Ethan couldn't speak. He nodded, eyes brimming. She smiled one last time, and for a heartbeat, her face flickered, Lily's smile overlapping perfectly with her own. Good night, Daddy. The word hit him like a storm breaking open inside his chest. And then, she was gone. The door never opened. The air simply shimmered, and she wasn't there anymore. Ethan dropped to his knees, the note clutched to his chest, tears spilling freely. Grace held him close, whispering through her sobs, she came back to let you go. And somewhere beyond the walls, the wind carried a child's laughter, fading, but warm. Be honest, could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never, if it would break you too deeply. The house was unbearably still the next morning. The faint smell of lavender hung in the hallway where Emma's laughter once drifted. The blanket she'd used was neatly folded at the edge of the bed, as if she had never slept there at all. Ethan stood at the doorway, gripping the frame, his breath uneven. It felt like waking from a dream that had been too beautiful to be real, and yet, somehow, too real to dismiss. Grace found him still standing there hours later. She touched his arm gently. Did she leave anything? Ethan didn't answer right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded note Emma had given him. She told me to read it when the sky looks like her favorite sunset. Grace's voice trembled. What does that mean? He looked out the window. Grey daylight filtered through clouds, unremarkable. Not yet, he said softly. The day passed slowly. Ethan walked through every corner of the house, noticing how it somehow felt lighter, as though the weight of years had finally lifted. The old photo frames gleamed brighter, the air no longer carried the ache of grief but a hush of peace. By evening, Grace brewed tea while Ethan sat by the window, watching the world dim toward twilight. They didn't talk much, words felt too small for what lingered between them. Then the sky began to change. It started with a gentle blush of pink, melting into streaks of gold, then deepening into a fierce, beautiful orange, the exact shade Lily used to paint when she drew sunsets. Ethan's heart pounded. It's time, he whispered. Grace joined him as he unfolded the note with trembling fingers. The paper smelled faintly of rain and wildflowers. In that childish handwriting, the same that had haunted his dreams, were a few simple words. Don't cry when the sun sets, Daddy. I'm just painting another sky. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks as Ethan pressed the letter to his heart, a sound escaping him, part sob, part relief. She's gone, he said through trembling lips, but she's free. Grace leaned into him, her voice barely a whisper. And maybe we are too. The last light of day kissed the windows before fading into dusk. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes, and for a moment, the soft ringing sounded like laughter, faint, distant, but full of joy. That night, Ethan dreamed again. He stood in a field of tall grass under a violet sky. Lily was there, older this time, her face radiant. You kept your promise, she said. He knelt, tears glimmering. I didn't want to lose you again. You didn't, she said. You found me in someone else, the part of me that wanted you to live again. He reached out to touch her hand, But instead of warmth, he felt light, weightless, infinite. "Will I see you again?" he asked. She smiled. "Every sunrise, Daddy. Every smile you give. That's where I'll be." When he woke, sunlight streamed through the curtains, gentle and golden. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel empty. He dressed, made breakfast, and placed a single lily in a vase on the table. Grace arrived soon after, and when she saw the flower, she smiled softly. They went together to the cemetery later that morning. The air was still, the sky bright. Ethan knelt before Lily's grave, the same way he always did, but this time, there was no ache, no sharp edge of sorrow. Just warmth. "I got your letter," he said quietly, placing the folded paper beside the stone. "And I'll never stop looking for your skies." Grace knelt beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. "She'd be proud of you," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Of us." As they stood, something caught their eye, a small white feather resting on the grave, glowing faintly in the sunlight. Ethan bent down and picked it up, holding it between his fingers. The light danced through it, soft and pure. Grace whispered, "She's saying goodbye." Ethan shook his head gently, smiling through his tears. "No," he said. "She's saying hello." They stood there a while longer, hand in hand, watching the clouds drift across the morning sky. The feather fluttered free from his grasp and rose, carried by a tender breeze that seemed to whisper through the trees, "Thank you for remembering me." Ethan watched it go, his heart steady, his spirit quiet. For the first time since the accident, he didn't feel haunted by what he'd lost, only grateful for what had returned. If you believe love still wins, comment in. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. Weeks passed, and life began to find its rhythm again, gentle, unhurried, and unexpectedly full. The sharpness of grief had softened into something almost sacred, like an old photograph that no longer hurt to hold. Ethan found himself smiling more often, sometimes for no reason at all. The house no longer echoed with silence. Instead, it breathed with warmth, the kind born from peace after years of pain. Grace had started coming by every Sunday. They'd share breakfast, talk about small things, work, neighbors, the weather, and sometimes, they'd sit quietly and just listen to the wind outside. There was a comfort in that stillness, a knowing that they didn't need to fill it with words anymore. One morning, Ethan stood in Lily's old room, untouched for 3 years until recently. The curtains swayed gently, sunlight spilling across the faded posters on the wall. He had finally opened the windows again, letting the air move freely through the space. On her desk sat the family drawing, now complete. He had framed it. The 3 figures held hands under a painted sky, a promise kept between worlds. He smiled, tracing his finger over Lily's small sketched face. "We're doing better, sweetheart," he whispered. "You'd like it here again." Outside, Grace called from the kitchen, "Coffee's ready." Ethan turned and smiled. "Coming." They sat together on the porch as morning light melted through the trees. Grace looked out toward the horizon and said softly, "You know, I dreamed of her last night." Ethan's eyes softened. "You did?" Grace nodded. She wasn't a child this time. She was older, maybe Emma's age. She looked happy. "She told me to stop worrying about you." He chuckled, eyes glimmering. "That sounds like her." She also said something strange, Grace added, hesitating. "What?" She said, "Mom, the hardest part of letting go is realizing you were never alone in the first place." Ethan sat quietly for a long time, letting the words sink in. "She's right," he murmured. They spent the day visiting the local children's home, the one Emma had mentioned when she'd said she stayed with Mrs. Harper. Grace had brought boxes of Lily's old toys and books to donate. As they entered, a few children ran up to greet them, laughing and curious. Mrs. Harper, a kind-eyed woman in her 60s, recognized Ethan immediately. "You're the man who came with Emma that day, aren't you?" Ethan froze. "That day?" She nodded warmly. "Yes, she came here with you a few weeks ago. Sweet girl. Said she'd found her family and wouldn't be coming back." Grace's hand tightened around Ethan's. We never brought her here," she said quietly. Mrs. Harper frowned. "Really?" But she insisted. She said her name was Emma Ray Walker. The surname hit like a wave. Grace gasped, her eyes wide. Walker! Ethan felt his breath leave his body. She took our name. Mrs. Harper smiled gently, unaware of their shock. I'm glad she did. She left something for you too. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small envelope, sealed with a pressed flower. She said you'd understand when the time was right. Ethan opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph, Lily, sitting in their old garden, smiling with sunlight in her hair. But written on the back in neat, careful letters were the words. You didn't lose me. You found me again. Love, Emma. Grace covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Ethan felt something inside him loosen, not pain, not disbelief, but gratitude so fierce it stole his breath. She wanted us to know she's okay, Grace whispered. Ethan nodded, his voice breaking. And that she's always been with us. They left the orphanage hand in hand, the sun setting low behind them, painting the world in that same orange-gold hue Lily had loved. The breeze carried the faintest scent of lilies, and in that fragile moment, everything, loss, love, faith, came full circle. That evening, as they returned home, Ethan placed the photograph beside the framed drawing. The two images, one real, one imagined, stood side by side, perfectly aligned, perfectly complete. Grace rested her head against his shoulder. She found her peace, she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. And she gave us ours. Outside, the first stars began to flicker, quiet witnesses to their healing. The world felt softer, lighter, almost holy in its stillness. And though the night deepened, the house seemed to glow from within, alive with memory, forgiveness, and the soft hum of love that refused to die. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, I felt you. Months drifted by gently, like pages turning in a story that finally learned peace. The seasons changed, yet the quiet warmth between Ethan and Grace stayed constant, tender, steady, full of understanding. The grief that had once ruled their days had become something else entirely, not an enemy, but a companion that reminded them how deeply they had loved. One golden afternoon, Ethan stood in the backyard, the same spot where Lily used to paint her sunsets. He'd rebuilt her small wooden easel and placed it facing west. A blank canvas waited, catching the glow of late sunlight. Grace joined him, holding 2 mugs of tea. You're painting again? She asked with a soft smile. Trying to, Ethan said. I thought maybe it's time to see the sky the way she did. Grace set her mug down and watched as he dipped the brush into orange, then pink. Each stroke felt deliberate, reverent, as if he were tracing pieces of Lily's spirit across the canvas. She'd love this, Grace whispered. You finally seeing beauty again. Ethan smiled faintly. She taught me how. The breeze carried the scent of lilies from the garden, their petals swaying gently in the light. For a moment, Grace closed her eyes, and in the hush between heartbeats, she thought she heard laughter, faint, soft, familiar. She opened her eyes to find Ethan staring at the sky, his brush paused midair. There, he said quietly. Do you see it? Grace followed his gaze. The clouds had formed the faint shape of a heart, outlined in gold by the setting sun. Her breath caught. Lily. Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening. She's still painting. They stood together in silence, the world bathed in a golden glow that seemed to stretch beyond time. In that light, pain didn't vanish, it transformed. As night settled, Ethan and Grace sat on the porch, their hands intertwined. Do you ever wonder why she came back the way she did? Grace asked. Ethan looked thoughtful. Maybe she knew we wouldn't heal if she didn't remind us she was still near. Grace smiled, tears sparkling in the fading light. Maybe love never leaves, it just changes its form until we're ready to recognize it. Ethan nodded. She came as Emma so we could finally say goodbye and learn to live again. A gentle wind stirred the trees. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the last light of day shimmered like a quiet promise, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken to be believed. Grace leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. Do you think we'll see her again? Ethan looked up at the deepening sky. Every time the sun sets, he said. And every time it rises. They sat there long after the stars appeared, their hearts full, not of sorrow, but of something gentler, something eternal. Ethan's eyes drifted toward the framed photo inside the window, Lily's smile shining beneath the words she'd once written. Don't cry when the sun sets, Daddy. I'm just painting another sky. He whispered, You painted the most beautiful one, sweetheart. The wind brushed past like a sigh, carrying the faintest whisper, I know. And in that moment, beneath the stars and the hush of night, Ethan realized what Lily had meant all along. Love doesn't end. It transforms, moves through time, takes shape in others, and teaches hearts to see light again. Tomorrow would come, as it always does, but for the first time in years, Ethan was ready to meet it. With Grace beside him, he smiled at the heavens. Good night, Lily, he whispered. Above them, a single star gleamed brighter than the rest, steady, golden, eternal. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Maybe they've forgotten that love doesn't die, it simply learns to shine in new skies. Sparkle's moral: the people we love never truly leave us. They live on in kindness, in forgiveness, and in every sunrise we dare to watch again. Love, once given, never fades, it only finds new ways to return.